Lesson 7.2 is on the Jews of Greece in the resistance. So to understand the main movement, you need to know two terms. There was Elas, that's the military wing of the leftist-leaning communist resistance movement, meaning the Greek People's Liberation Army, and the general political movement was called EAM, the National Liberation Front. Okay. Between 43 and 44, essentially when the Jews are being ghettoized and organized, Jews flee from the cities. They even fled from Salonika, and they join the leftist-leaning resistance. Usually they're found in the mountainous regions, and they're fighting against the Germans. So Jews go as teenagers, also women. They volunteer to be fighters, but families also go to seek refuge, and then sometimes they volunteer for EAM, or they help with Elas. Now, there were hardly any Jews in the rightist, royalist resistance movement, which was called Edes, the National Republican Greek League under Napoleon Czarist. They were thought of as anti-Semitic, not wanting the Jews. We know of 4 Jews who actually remained in Edes until the liberation. I estimate there were probably between 20 and 40 Jews who actually had joined, but left very early. Now, in the rightist dictatorship in Greece until 41, under Metaxas, did not accept Jews in its youth movement called Aeon. Metaxas, told, was friendly to the Jews, but the nationalist movement of the dictatorship was not friendly to the Jews. Now here I have some names of Jewish officers in Elas EAM and heroes. I've talked about a few of them before. Lazarus Azari was on the Central Committee. He established cooperatives in the Thessaly region. He was in the battle on the Henrietta Szold illegal immigration boat in August 46. There was a communist Jewish leader, an activist and partisan captain, meaning he's the head of a unit, named Yitzchak Moshe, and his code name was Captain Kitsos. So in the partisans, no one had the real name. They all had code names. There was a young activist named Baruch Shibi. He was the head of the EAM Jewish Committee in Athens. They were the ones that encouraged Rabbi Barzilai to resist and flee. Shibi did a few things. Later, after the war, he was a leader in the Jewish community. But he hid actually in the house of someone named Nikos Louvaris, who was the Greek education minister in the Mikrokinesia area. There was a partisan, and you'll see his picture shortly, named David Brudo. He was a fighter, and after the war, he was branded for killing rightists in the Parnassos region and throwing him into a cave to their deaths. And he was sent to forced labor for 11 years. Originally he was given a death sentence, but it was rescinded. But Moshe Sharet, who was the prime minister of Israel at the time, requested that he be given clemency. He was taken out of forced labor and abandoned islands and allowed to come to Israel, and he settled in Jerusalem. There was a physician named Emmanuel Aruch, who was a physician for Elas, and he was in a big battle called Karotes. Leon Amar was from Chalkiva. He was a young commander in Elas, and in the Battle of Steni, where the Germans had detected that the Jews were hiding, the Germans had brought a big force to attack the village, and Amar led a small group of partisans to actually defeat the Germans and destroy all their ammunition and artillery. 70 Jews were saved. For Greece, that was like the Warsaw Ghetto battle. Julia Bibi was a young activist in the partisans in 41. There was no Elas or Edes yet. So, but she she was, let's say, in a fringe leftist resistance movement, and she blew up the German officers' club in Athens. Now, there were 1,500 Eretz Yisrael volunteers, Jewish volunteers in the British Army, so they had been defeated by the Germans in the south of Greece, in the Peloponnese and Crete. Many of them were taken as prisoner of war to Dachau, but others were taken as prisoner of war in Greece, but they escaped. So people like Shimon Peres's father was escaped and was in a monastery. But in addition to various young Jews being parachuted into Europe, 4 Jews were parachuted into Greece to have to sabotage a bridge over the Yorgopotamos River. It took 2 months to actually organize the attack. They blew up a bridge which was an important supply route for the Germans to North Africa. This was in December 42. They were parachuted in October 1942, and together, this is the only time that Elas and Eyam and Edes were together. They organized the actual demolition. It succeeded, and then they never cooperated until after that. Then there were Eretz Yisrael soldiers like David Simon, he was in Piraeus as a prisoner of war, but he did sabotage. He was a German Jew in Palestine whose parents remained in Germany, and he knew that they were deported and killed by the Nazis, so he wanted to retaliate and kill any German that he saw or could. And he, during this period, 41, 42, he killed about 100 German and also Italian soldiers in the Piraeus, Athens area. And he sabotaged the plane movement because he sabotaged the gasoline of the airplanes that was stored in the port of Piraeus. Okay, in the region of Thessaly, there were 4 Jewish communities. All the leaders of all the communities encouraged the religious leaders, the rabbis, encouraged the Jews to flee to the mountains, and then they were in Elas Eyam as volunteer fighters, or the families lived in the villages and helped the movement. And when the Germans attacked various strongholds, all the people moved with all the population that was in the Elas Eyam stronghold. We know that there were at least 100 Jews in the partisans from these 4 different communities. This is a woman that I uncovered. Her name was Sarika Yoshua. Her married name became Fortis later on in Israel. So she's from the Jewish community of Chalkis. She was related to Mordechai Frazis, this war hero. She became a partisan, and then she formed a female partisan unit. She had been friendly to another woman who was a teacher and a partisan, who was Jewish, named Mimi Moskowitz. And after Mimi was ruthlessly killed by the German commander, when she was detected, then Sarika sort of got into action. So Sarika, in the Evia Peninsula, Jews crossed to get to the eastern side to wait for boats to get to Turkey. So she was also part of helping the movement of the refugees cross the island. So Elas would not let non-Jews cross the island and escape from Greece. They wanted Gentiles to stay in Greece to fight against the Germans. Jews, they would help leave because they knew that the Jews were persecuted and would be arrested and deported. So they, together with the Haganah, organized the boat movement. It wasn't simple at all. They even had to find Jews in hiding from Athens and get them to a place called Marathon, then across the straits to get to the peninsula of Evia. It was very tough. It was a rocky mountain. Okay, so even old people and babies had to at night climb to the top of the ridge and then cross maybe 9 kilometers to get to the other side of the island. So Sarika, as a partisan, she was part of the patrolling, so they didn't allow Greeks who weren't Jews to leave. and the Jews they enabled to leave, and also they would help them get to the other side of the island. They'd help them find refuge in monasteries, etc., etc. In the end, the Jews had to get to a place called Zacchaeus, on a little inlet on the eastern side of the Evia Peninsula. And this is a very mountainous region. It's very rugged terrain. It's a miracle that all this happened there. So, but she had been a captainicia. She was like a captain, just like Captain Kitsos for men, and of the model women's platoon of the 7th Elas Regiment, and her name was Captain Sarita. These are a poster for Greek Jews to join the resistance, the one on the left. On the right, this is a destroyed German plane that 2 Jews who were in the partisans detected. David Brudo's on the left and Louis Cohn is on the right. Here's a picture that Brudo gave me, which has become popular, and I published it in various places. So these are the heroes of the Elas Eyam movement.